I want to welcome Venk Shukla, who runs Monta Vista Capital, a venture capital fund in Silicon Valley. He was former chair, global chair of TIE, which everybody knows, and is currently involved in Silicon Valley TIE, himself an investor and an entrepreneur, a brilliant person in technology. And we connected regarding my recent book on artificial intelligence and the future of power. Welcome, Venkji, to my show. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's an honor to be having this conversation with you. I've been a long-term admirer, you see, of your viewpoint, you see, on various subjects, and I've been following that. So it's a delight to talk to you.
Yes, and it's a mutual feeling because I've heard so much about you, and to have you here talk about this very important field of artificial intelligence. Now, before we zoom in on artificial intelligence, it's sort of the cutting edge of innovation now. How important is innovation to the success of a civilization? Because I think that's a broad topic to start.
Yeah, if you look back at the history of the world, it's no coincidence that the most innovative societies were the most prosperous societies. And so, Indians and Chinese, I think they were the most prosperous societies for thousands of years because they were the most innovative societies. And even in the recent, you look at, not a single country has become prosperous without becoming innovative. So Japan and Korea and most recently China, all this thing is advances in prosperity is linked to innovation. I mean, the only exceptions really are the petrodollars countries who got lucky for a brief period of time. But throughout this arc of history, the innovation is the prerequisite to prosperity of a country.
So let's take that innovation as the key word and the theme. How would you say, what sort of industries today? I mean, this is a historical view, but today, how would innovation relate to industrial might in the world today?
If you look at it, that's a very good question. If you look at it, the most lucrative industries today, are really at the cutting edge of innovation. So let me just mention four of them.
Okay.
One is pharmaceutical. Second is avionics. The third is semiconductor. And fourth is medical equipment. Any hospital you want to build in India, even if it's for charitable purposes, 80% of all the money that they have goes into buying medical equipment, made abroad. And if you look at it, I think since we are talking about this thing, you see, both Indians, we care about India. If you look at the Indian value add to these most innovative, most lucrative industries, the value add from India to these four is zero.
So India is abysmal in these four industries. That's a important point my guest is making, viewers. I just want you to notice that. Pharmaceuticals, a lot of people will say we make generic drugs, but then the point is that is copycatting. It's not innovating in the sense of drug discovery. When the drug goes off of the patent, you can copy it and make it. And India has good chemistry, not good biology, but chemistry is good to reverse engineer. And in that sense, it's fine. But the real innovation of inventing the new drug isn't much in India. Avionics, yes, avionics is a correct. And semiconductors, we hardly have any. We are dependent on semiconductors. We can design engineering wise, but then the semiconductor has to be manufactured somewhere else. And then, of course, medical equipment. Would you also add defense, military weapons?
Yeah, but in the military weapons, I think is really avionics that the electronics part of that is really what gives the real value add.
Right. That is very interesting point. So is India innovative in anything today?
India, if you look at, you see what we have done in the last 70 years, there are 3 or 4 areas where Indians have done amazing sort of innovation.
Okay.
And this is something, you see, for the rest of the world to admire and emulate. I mean, the oldest story really is the Space Research Organization. I
ISRO.
mean, yeah, completely homegrown, and yet competitive with the rest of the world. And in some ways, you see far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of how much it takes us to do a job that others do. Uh, so ISRO is one. Atomic Energy Commission, you see, was another example.
Yes.
The green revolution that we had, you see, was another example. And most recently, this whole idea of Aadhaar, the biometric basis, and on which all this, all these brilliant applications that are being built on top of that, like digital locker, like UPI-based payments and stuff. These are amazing innovations, and India ought to be immensely proud of things that we are bringing to the rest of the world.
So if you we've said innovation is the important engine for a civilization. India lost it in some of the major industries in the world today. We are nowhere to be found. But these are examples where we are innovative. What would you attribute the Indian innovation in these industries to? What stands out as a cause for innovation in these cases?
It's a if I were to look at, you see, what is the common theme across these four examples? The common thing is that all of them were led by deep domain experts who were passionate about the cause and were insulated from the bureaucracy.
Okay, very good.
So the bureaucracy did not have to approve their budget, did not have to, there was no sort of a bureaucrat sitting on top of them. And it was all these things, you see, where essentially the prime minister of the country is empowering them to go ahead and do something completely outside the realm of the bureaucracy.
Yeah.
And so we know the recipe. We know the recipe, you see, for innovation.
So this is interesting you say, because Homi Bhabha convinced Nehru way soon after independence that even though we are poor and all that, we have food shortage, but atomic energy, we got to do it. And, wisely, they left him alone and he built up this whole thing, and it's done very well. And similarly for ISRO, my family knew Satish Dhawan. He went to college with my father in Lahore. And so as a young boy, we used to meet him whenever he would come to Delhi. Very, very inspiring guy, very articulate, brilliant man, full of passion, as you said, and no tolerance for bureaucracy. Nobody, he wouldn't put up with anybody's nonsense. So I'm not personally familiar with the individuals in the other areas. But if you say, okay, they were free of bureaucracy, and that goes along with a gigantic person, larger than life, a towering person who was kind of running the show, who had credibility. The government would look up to him. The prime minister would leave him alone, and the bureaucracy dare not touch him. He won't put up with anybody's nonsense. That, I think, that mixture is a important mixture, as you said. Domain expert, somebody who's a subject matter expert, who's not some general purpose bureaucrat, some IAS guy, and who won't put up with any nonsense from these bureaucrats. He goes straight to the prime minister. He gets his thing approved, and then he goes runs with it. This is very interesting because such a person can probably do daring things. He can make bold bets. He can hire other technocrats, and the free of politics. I would say free of bureaucracy also means free of politics, because one of the things that the ISRO people, I know some ISRO people, they were saying that there's hardly any. Because they're far away from Delhi, there's hardly any, politician visits they have to worry about. No politician comes and wants a big tour with cameras, and they just don't do all that. So I think you're onto something.
I think if you look at, we talked about semiconductors, for instance. The tragedy of the country is that 20 years ago, India was far ahead of China in semiconductors, far, far ahead. India was always, because a lot of semiconductor companies came to India, we had a huge base of domestic expertise, especially in terms of, creating intellectual property. China was nowhere to be seen. 20 years later, China is the second largest semiconductor power in the world, with ambition of becoming the number one in the world. And why did we miss this? We consistently missed the window. Every electronics minister came to Silicon Valley. I've interacted with three of them. Every electronics minister would come to Silicon Valley, and with accompanied by a large contingent of bureaucrats, all generalists. They'll come. They'll all make the right noises. Go back. Nothing would happen. Absolutely nothing would happen. And you can understand that. People who are, semiconductor industry is a very complex industry, and it's a very dynamic industry. In order for you to make a forceful decision, if you don't have that kind of expertise and understanding, and you are looking at, you're looking at 2-year kind of a time frame, you see that in which you're going to be there, your instinct is to make safe decisions.
Yeah, so you are risk averse because you don't have the confidence.
You always are risk averse. And second, there is no consequence to being bold. I mean, there is no upside to being bold. There is a lot of, in a bureaucrat's mind, there's a lot of downside to being bold. But there is no upside to being bold. As he sees that, he or she sees that. So with the result, for 20 years, every electronics minister, everyone has come to Silicon Valley, said we'll do this right thing, and nothing has happened. And today we are so far behind compared to China. It's all a long story of a sad long story of one missed opportunity after another.
Yeah, not only behind China, but even Taiwan, South Korea. I mean, India is India is not even, we cannot say that it's number 3 after US and China.
No, we're not. We're nowhere.
We're nowhere. Yeah. This is very interesting. Now, this has to do with government, because government has not shaken up. The government has not shaken up the bureaucracy. The government has shaken up, okay, politics should be done differently. Instead of corruption, there should be transparency. All those are very important things. But the bureaucracy is very powerful, maybe even more powerful than before. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, the bureaucracy becoming so powerful?
I think the tragedy of India has been that political class, regardless of party and affiliation or the background of where they come from, they feel very comfortable with the generalist bureaucracy. And so every strong chief minister that I've ever met has always sidelined all the politicians, and always ruled through the bureaucrats. Every single one that I've known.
This is very, very interesting. Generalist. So the problem with the bureaucracy is that they are basically generalists. That is true. That I can say. Yeah.
Right. And they take pride in that. They take pride in being generalists. They take, sometimes. So I had a very interesting conversation with someone from, some senior bureaucrat about GST. And the GST idea was a great idea. And it was a big political victory to get it through. Yet the rollout was botched. The reason the rollout was botched, and I had this conversation with a senior bureaucrat. I said, if you guys had even one practicing chartered accountant among the people who have the team that was making the rules, he would have pointed out how stupid, how complicated this thing is, which requires to see a corner, kirana shop guy to file 2 electronic returns a month. Now the guy has to hire a chartered accountant, and more importantly, he has to hire an IT guy. I said, what are you talking about? Any chartered accountant could have told you that this is unimplementable.
Yeah.
So I said, why didn't you have a chartered accountant in your team? So you know what he says? Well, he'll have a vested interest. So here is the thing, right? They pride themselves on objectivity.
Yeah.
But objectivity is at the expense of understanding of the issues. And the reason GST was so complex was, if you don't understand something, you make it complex.
Right.
If you really understand something, then your prescription is simple.
So IAS is like a trade union, if you think about it. I mean, it's a trade union that close ranks. I was interviewed recently by some very prominent IAS person for a literary festival which he runs, and I asked him that why aren't you bringing in people at the top level from industry, from technology, and so on? He says in theory there is a lateral promotion, lateral entry, but a few people who were brought in, we made sure they failed. The IS guys don't want outsiders. They want only promotion from within. They want inbred. And so they close ranks when somebody from the outside is appointed head of something. Even though he may have domain expertise, they'll just make sure he fails because he doesn't know the ropes, he doesn't know the system, doesn't know the politics. And so this is a kind of a stranglehold. The British bureaucracy stranglehold continues with India. And therefore...
Actually, trade union is an incomplete sort of analog. Okay. They are not just the trade union, but they're also the management.
Yeah, they are both the trade union. Yeah. So it's a kind of a unionized management.
But I don't think we should blame them at all. Nobody gives up power willingly. Nobody who has power ever gives up willingly. Why did they? I think it's the failure of political class, because all the powers and all the authority is there that political class has, is the lack of will or lack of understanding.
This is a British hangover, I guess. I mean, this is not sort of a traditional Indian system. Venk, the question that I have is, why not the private sector? Why couldn't a Reliance or a Tata have gone into semiconductors? Why? I mean, I can see that avionics, maybe it's controlled by the government because of military reasons and all that. But, things like drug discovery in the US, in the Western countries, drug discovery and semiconductor would be examples of private sector. So has the private sector been sort of short-sighted, greedy, quick money, rather than making the long bets?
No, I think, I can see where that argument could be made. So let's set aside pharmaceuticals right now. Let's talk about semiconductors. In semiconductor, I think the upfront investment is so massive that you want some assurances that there is a market for what you're going to build. Because the day you build your fabrication facility, it's not going to be state of the art.
Right.
State of the art you accomplish with incremental acquisition of knowledge and expertise. So by definition, what you build today is not going to be state of the art. China, when they started building this SMIC semiconductor fab, they didn't even aim, at the top end, of the market. They aimed, at the end of the market that was somewhat obsolete. Not completely, but somewhat obsolete. But guess what? There's a huge volume in that, and they got the assurance that there will be buyer for that. The government of China will make sure that the Chinese consumption, is pointed towards the production of SMIC. Government, has never been willing to say that the consumption in India, in defense or in government or in private sector, would somehow, be made available to someone who's going to put $5 billion in putting up a fab.
Now, if we look at all this as a good foundation and we talk about AI, a decade ago, we were saying that India is the software superpower of the world. But out of this software industry came AI. And why India is not an AI superpower? India has manpower. Individuals are very brilliant, but they go overseas and work for other people. And China, which was not a superpower of software, become an AI superpower. So what do you think went wrong? Is this a government thing, or is it private sector responsibility that while they were doing wage arbitrage, making money, hire somebody for $10,000 and sell him for $30,000 and make money, they did not reinvest some of these profits into futurist technologies, the big bets, long-term, like China did. They also did wage arbitrage for factories, but they took a lot of that money and reinvested it into long-term things. So how do you feel India lost this AI race?
I think, they are not the TCS and Wipros, and Accentures, and Infosys are not really the villain here. They're not product companies; they're service companies. I think I think what India I see failed to do is to create enabling environment for startups. And it started on that path only 5 years ago, and that is to the everlasting credit of Modi government. That for 70 years of existence, we did not realize that startups needed special protection. There's special kind of thing. We treated them like any other company. And if you treat a 6-month-old baby as a 30-year-old man, you know who is going to suffer.
Right.
And so that has been the failure to recognize how strategic startups are and failures to create an enabling environment for them to succeed and flourish. That has been India's failing. Infosys and Wipros and all these guys, they chose the service path. Service people are never the innovators. In US, the big service companies you see are Accenture and Deloitte and KPMG. They are not the thought leaders in artificial intelligence.
Right.
The thought leaders in artificial intelligence are the product companies. And so that's one thing. The second thing is the in US, the relationship between government, academia, and industry. Government funds basic research, and universities and the individual professors are benefit personally from commercialization of that technology.
Yes.
And that virtuous cycle that generates, successful companies, which generates tax revenue, which goes to the government, which funds more research.
No, this is so important. This military or government, industry, academic complex that is very powerful. And India has separate silos. DRDO does its own research, and they don't include private industry. And private industry is doing its research. And academia is mainly teaching and politics and all that, a lot of that. They're really not at the cutting edge of research. So I think that's a very important issue that you've raised.
So, even China, one of the smartest thing they did was they said to any Chinese student, if you want to go for postdoctoral, to any American university, they will completely underwrite your expenses for 3 years, provided you come back.
Right.
And they have a way of ensuring that you come back. Otherwise, they'll put your father in jail.
The surety is given by the surety is the family.
The surety
that's the collateral.
That's right. Yeah. So I was talking to a professor here, a very famous Indian professor at Stanford University. I said, how come we see so many of your postdoc scholars are Chinese? How come we don't take more Indian? So he says, he says, as a professor, for every postdoc thing I get, I have to pay for it. With Chinese students, I don't have to. Chinese government is paying for it. So it makes the decision no-brainer for me. Plus, he says, if I do get kids from India, 90% of them don't go back.
Right.
Whereas 90% of Chinese go back.
Right. So you know what? So India is exporting brains rather than making products and being able to license the products, rather than making the intellectual property. So we are proud that so many tens of billions of dollars of remittances come because it's wage arbitrage. We are selling labor, and we measure the success of how much labor we are selling. But what we don't realize is that for every $1 of remittances that comes back, the intellectual property which this guy made for the American company is worth so many fold more. So if you look at the cumulative value of the Indian brains in Silicon Valley and how much money worth of market cap they have created, it is far, far bigger than the value of remittances going home. So, India has got the wrong metrics. We are celebrating the sale of raw labor. And then, this Indian brains creating all this intellectual property for the Western companies, then we pay a lot of money to license it back. So, for instance, the Rafael jets are a huge amount of tens of millions of dollars per jet because it's got all this AI for multi-targets and for all this kind of stuff. And we are not able to do it in India because while we have brains, we haven't created big missions like the ISRO big mission, like the Baba Atomic Research, a huge goal worth lots of money and a lot of people put on it. We haven't done that in the tech area. We really haven't done that. So this is very interesting. Now, as a venture capitalist, how do you feel about the venture capital industry in India?
I think it has come a long, long way, and I think the speed with which it has picked up in India is very, very impressive, actually. So just think about it, that this is the whole startup India that Prime Minister launched was only 5 years ago, and in 5 years now we have 30 companies, startups that are valued at more than $1 billion,
Hmm.
and every such success inspires 1,000 other people to take the plunge. So essentially, because there are these 30 unicorns, I can guarantee you that there are another 30,000 people getting inspired and saying, if he can do it, I can do it.
Hmm.
And so I think the most positive thing that has happened in India over the last 5 years is that it has captured the imagination of younger generation, that they could be problem solver and they could be entrepreneurs. And what has happened is that because everyone in India has somehow benefited from these new apps, like ordering food or making doctor's appointment or teaching at home and all of those kind of things. What it has done is that the mindset in India that technology and entrepreneurship could be solution to India's problems is a very, very recent development. And
Yeah.
it augurs extremely well for the future, because that sets the people, the decision makers and opinion leaders, that innovation is the way to go.
Right.
So that is a very, very positive development in India.
But isn't the size of the Indian venture funding, domestic venture funding, still sort of small?
It's very small. It's very, very small. And I think, but I think, one of the things is that because the economy itself is so big, it's only, and if the government is sensible about how to attract foreign capital, uh, this problem would be solved, because there is no shortage of capital in the rest of the world, and the rest of the world does not have as many exciting opportunities to invest in. If the government were smart, they could put that kind of a regime that makes it extremely attractive for outsiders to pour money into India.
So that needs a ease of doing business.
One thing that government could do with one stroke of pen, really, is to say that anyone who invests in startups, most of the time they will lose money, but in case you happen to make money, there will be zero capital gains tax on it.
Yeah, that's a big thing there. I fully agree with that. So final thing I want our viewers to know is, what are some of the exciting ventures that Monta Vista is invested in?
So I invest in three kinds of, basically three dominant themes. One is cloud infrastructure.
Okay.
Anything that enables clouds to become more pervasive. That's one category I invest in. The second category I invest in are enterprise applications. The latest generation of enterprise SaaS applications.
Right.
The third category I invest in, and I'm somewhat unusual in the Valley to do that, I invest in those rare entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley who also understand some big traditional industry, and they understand how technology can be used to completely transform that industry. So, for instance, one of the companies I've invested in automates the process of custom clearance of shipping containers that land in the ports.
Okay.
So this whole process of custom clearance throughout the history of global commerce is very, very manual.
Right.
So using artificial intelligence, how do you automate that so that as soon as the container lands, the custom authorities have full and complete description of what is inside, and accurate tariff calculation on that. So there is a zero this thing, and you immediately let the importer know what time to send the truck to pick it up. So you completely eliminate all inefficiency around handling of containers.
No, this is brilliant. We could go on talking for a long time, Venk, and I think we should. But this is a kind of an introduction to my viewers about you and your views on this. And thank you so much. My AI book is generating conversations with thought leaders like you, and coming at it from different points of view. Some from a policy point of view, some venture capital. You're one of the foremost venture capitalists, and I'm delighted and honored to be discussing this with. And being both Bharatiyas in our heart and lovers of India, want India to do well. Our critique is constructive critique. It's out of love that for the country that we want to do all these things. And I want viewers to know that this is intended to help the country by giving some objective feedback. I know Shri Shukla ji is a great admirer of Indian talent in the Silicon Valley. He's known for championing the success of India and Indians. So thank you very much, Shukla ji, for joining this, and we'll continue conversations more in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for this stimulating conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm honored, and we'll have many more.